All right, Travis McEnery from Science Communication on YouTube, and he will be presenting the questions they have and the roles we play. Originally a machinist from Edmonton, but having loved spiders since childhood, Travis had made a couple of spider videos for YouTube shortly after moving to Nova Scotia. After he tried to answer some questions that he usually had about spiders, but could never find the answers on the internet, which led him down a rabbit hole of research and discovery. And it turns out a lot of other people had the same questions and the same problems, and the channel took off. Now he's making long-form spider content on the channel part-time. As far as the animal we most look forward to seeing, it was, it's more Latin, I practiced it and I blew it. Aphanopelma, I don't know. Tad, how do I say that? Thank you, what he said. And the tarantulas and the scorpions. Please welcome Travis.
Hello, everyone. I'm Travis McEnery. I'm a 40-something machinist who has literally never taken a university-level biology class in my life, and yet somehow a YouTube channel that I started less than 2 years ago now has 44,000 subscribers and counting. And I think how that happened, I think how that happened shows us a few things. It shows us that people want to know more than we think they do. But also, that explaining our methodology matters a whole lot more than we thought it did. But to do that well requires a really robust relationship between the research scientists and science communicators. Everywhere. We are living in a time of unprecedented skepticism of authority, of science, and that has potentially dire consequences, which makes our jobs and our cooperation with each other all the more important. I encountered some of those challenges with the first videos that I did. It was in late 2022 that things kind of came together for me to do my first video, which was on the cellar spider, and that was mostly for fun. It got a few views, made me want to do another one. So the second one I wanted to put a bit more research into. And I mean, I was a machinist. Nobody had any reason to believe anything that I said. Oh, right. So I wanted to make sure that I had good sources, and ultimately I wanted to answer the questions that people were actually asking, like average people. And this was where I discovered a real gap in the information that was available online. There were lots of videos about tarantulas, lots about exotic species and exotic places, but the spiders that people always asked me about were the ones that they found in their kitchen. They wanted to know, how long was it going to live? What if it had babies? Was it dangerous? All of that kind of thing. And the information that was easy to get to was very often unclear. It was very shallow. Sometimes it was just outright wrong, and it was almost always contradictory. So I learned how to use Google Scholar. I got in touch with Dr. Catherine Scott, who helped me track down a few sources, and then the third video, which was on the yellow sac spider, out of nowhere took off. This came as a surprise. It somehow racked up 400,000 views in its first month. And I had comments from people saying that they had no idea why the algorithm recommended it to them. They didn't even like spiders, but they somehow sat through the whole 28 minutes. And I had other people say that it had really put their minds at ease after finding all this contradictory information. So this one sort of settled it for them somehow. And so what was it about that video that made it take off like that? I mean, the yellow sac isn't really a high-profile spider, but it is a little bit controversial. And I knew that if I wanted people to listen to what I was telling them, I was going to need receipts. So this forced me to sort of follow the chain of citations all the way back to the very beginning, which involved obtaining some paywalled papers. And that's when I learned that bad information is always in great supply and is always free, while the quality information is a lot harder to get to if you're not an academic. I don't pretend to have the solution to that. I know publishing costs money, but there's got to be a better way. Anyway, I realized that by going back to the primary sources and describing the methodologies for the studies I was looking at, what I was communicating to the viewers was not just what we know, but how we know it. And I think that's really important in science communication, because the funny thing about this new skepticism that we're seeing is that it has given people a hunger for information that they feel they can actually trust. And they have a lot more faith in the information if they can understand how we arrived at it. Now, it would be easy to think that scientists could just tell everybody, you know, here's what we studied and here's what we learned and here's how we did it. That sounds simple, but scientists, while they may get consulted for an article or an interview, you get a few lines or a few seconds at best a lot of the time to describe what you found. And all of your hard work, all of your clever methodology, all of that ends up in a research paper that 99% of the public never sees. And meanwhile, any idiot with a TikTok account can reach an audience of millions with some sensationalized nonsense. And I'm sure that that's the thing that makes a lot of you go home and scream into a pillow. So I feel that this is where science communication really comes in. I can't imagine trying to run my channel while I was also doing field research or lab research, which I don't know how to do anyway. But I can read your papers. I can say in a video, here's the person who did the research. Here's how they did it. And I can have some fun with it. I can package it for an audience that's a much more public audience instead of having to put it in a form for academic posterity. I once talked to Spencer Hoffman from My Wild Backyard, a really successful wildlife channel, what some of the challenges he faced were. And he said his main challenge was how to reach the people who most need to learn about wildlife and also get them to click. And I see what he means, because the people who most need to be educated on this are probably not the people who fire up Google Scholar on a Friday night. But I can only do what I do because a lot of scientists doing lab and field work have taken the time to write back to me, to explain things to me, send me their papers. One of the strengths of the Yellow Sag video was that I'd actually reached out to Dr. Victoria Schmalhofer at IEPUI and asked her about a study she'd done that was referenced and misinterpreted by the Wikipedia article on that species. And she very kindly responded to me and explained things at length, and that was one of the main strengths of that video. So the relationship between the researchers and the communicators is, I think, really critical now more than ever. Without the research and the methodologies and the papers, I and others like me, we would just be more voices making more claims. But a lot of us are amateurs, and we often need help to get it right. And I mean, I don't fully understand how principal component analysis works. I have no idea. But there is real weight, especially now, to a real human being putting their face on camera and saying, hey, I talked to the people who actually did this. Here's what they said. Here's how they did it. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting our hands on the paper. Sometimes it's a matter of getting some clarification. Sometimes it's an actual interview, and when that happens, that's awesome. It is funny, though, how intimidating reaching out can be for somebody like me, because believe it or not, if your name is even on a paper, you are immediately terrifying to amateurs. But those first scientists that I reached out to, they not only responded, they made me feel welcome. When I felt like an imposter, you know, intruding into academic space as an amateur, they made me feel like I had a right to be there, asking those questions. And I cannot stress enough how important that was. So science and science communication, I think it matters more now than it ever has before in humanity's history. I think everyone in this room knows there's a lot of bad information masquerading as science. Alexa apparently thinks that birds are mammals. That really messed up a game of 20 questions my wife was having with my 11-year-old. And as a society, we are looking down the barrel of some spectacularly bad collective decisions. But we can help steer this ship in the right direction. It doesn't matter if you study dung beetles instead of climate change. That's fine. When people see how science is actually done, even if it's just in one field, it influences their opinion of science in general. And as research scientists and as science communicators, We work best when we work together. There's a chasm between the average person, who's presumably a voter, and real reliable science, and I think we can bridge that gap. Most researchers in the lab don't have time to build and maintain a whole YouTube channel, and most of the SciCommers that I know who are making wildlife content online don't usually have time to do a lot of field research. But a strong relationship between the two creates something that is so much more than the sum of its parts. And if we can foster that, we can show a lot of people not just what we know, but how we know it. And that can quite literally change not just how people see the world, but maybe the world itself. Thank you.